series this year, the best year ever, with talking about the modern family. And again, we're not making promises. We're not looking for this to be the best year financially that you've ever had, or that, again, nobody's going to get sick in your house, or that you and your wife or husband are going to be, just hunky-dory all year. That's not the kind of year we're talking about. We're talking about hoping and praying that as we walk through Scripture together this year and we open ourselves up to what the Lord wants to do in our lives, that this is the year that really we can look back on years later and say, man, in 2015, that just launched us into the rest of our lives and helped shape the rest of our lives. And so we're going to talk about different things throughout the year. We're going to talk about wisdom. We're going to talk about love. We're going to talk about money and all these different things, and just kind of looking at over the next year what Jesus says about these different areas of our lives. And so we're going to start, like I said, with the family, talking about reframing the modern family. I don't know if you remember years ago, some of you older folks, okay, I'll just stop there. How many of you remember most newscasts back years ago at 10 o'clock at night used to start with a question? How many of you remember what they asked? It's 10 o'clock. Do you know where your children are? Do you know where your children are? It's 10 o'clock. Do you know where your children are? Well, I want to ask you the same question this morning, but I want to ask it from a different perspective. It's 2015. Do you know where your family is spiritually? Now, I know where my kids are right now. I mean, they're over there in the other building, in class and nursery and all that. So I'm not talking about geographically or physically speaking, but do you know not just where your kids are, but where your family is spiritually? Where your family is. Do you know where your family is? And that's what we're going to talk about for the next several weeks. Now, I want to just put this out there, especially after what we saw, what we're going to be doing on Wednesday nights. I know some of you may say, well, I'm single, I'm not married, I don't have kids living in the home anymore. Don't check out on me, because what we saw in the video that we're going to talk about on Wednesday nights, and what we're going to talk about today some, is that it doesn't matter if you have kids or if you're married or not. We're called to be the community of God raising up the next generation of believers. Because the truth of the matter is, God created, if you read the Bible, God created and blessed two institutions, the church and the family. Those are two institutions that God created himself and blessed, the church and the family, and they are inseparable. You cannot have one without the other. That doesn't work the way God designed it to work. You can't have the church without family, and you can't have the family without church. It just, again, does not work the way God has intended it to work. And so this is for all of us. It doesn't matter if you're 60, it doesn't matter if you're 20. This applies to every single one of us, because we are a part of the church and we are a church family. So if you have your Bibles, I want you to go to Judges, the book of Judges, chapter 2. And this morning we're going to talk about what I consider to be the saddest verse in all the Bible. If you'll back up, Jack. The saddest verse in all the Bible. It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking because this is a story, just to kind of give you some context. This is a story, it's a tale of three generations. Three generations. We start with what we call the Egypt generation. The Egypt generation, these were the people, these were the families that lived in Egypt as God's people. They were slaves for over 400 years. This is the generation that left Egypt, that God delivered out of slavery through Moses, that saw God part the Red Sea, that saw him rain down plague after plague after plague. This generation experienced more miracles and saw God move in greater ways than any other generation in human history. That's the Egypt generation. They're the ones that left Egypt. They're the ones that came to Mount Sinai for God to give them the covenant law, and they're the ones that built the golden calf. Okay, you remember that? They thought Moses was gone. He was gone for 40 days up on the mountain talking with God. They freaked out. They were like, well, we don't have a leader, so let's just melt down all of our gold and make a cow, which is always a brilliant idea. Worship a cow instead of God. So that's what they do. They dance around the cow. Moses comes down. God punished this generation by saying, listen, because of your sin, because you did not worship me alone, you can't go into the promised land. You have to wander around the wilderness for 40 years, and you're going to die. This whole generation is going to die before you get to the promised land. So then we move to the wilderness generation. This is their children. They're the ones who grew up in the wilderness for 40 years. They saw God provide day after day after day. And when we say wilderness, we literally mean desert, where there's no water and there's not, like, you can't garden out there. God provided every single day manna from heaven and quail. And the Bible says that they walked for 40 years in the desert, and the soles of their shoes never wore out because God was taking care of his people providentially, sovereignly. Yes, they were in rebellion against him, but he still loved them, and he still provided for them because they were his chosen people. This is the generation right here that Moses, right before they got ready to go into the promised land, Moses retaught the law that was given at Sinai. It's where we get the book of Deuteronomy from. Moses retaught them the law and said, I want to remind you of these things that God said that we will live in right relationship with him, so that when we get into the promised land, you know how God expects us to live in right relationship and fellowship with him. So he gave them the law again in Deuteronomy. They were reminded of it, all the things that God said. And then this generation, Moses died, and a new leader arose, and his name was Joshua. He's the one that took this generation. They entered the promised land after 40 years of wandering. And then we move to this generation, their kids. And this is where we pick up in Judges chapter 2. Saddest verse in all the Bible. It says, in all this generation, this wilderness generation, all that generation also were gathered to their fathers. They died. And then read this. And there arose another generation, right here, after them, who did not know the Lord or the work that he had done for Israel. After this generation passes away, their kids are living in the promised land, and they do not know the Lord or the work that he had done for his people. How sad is that? I mean, when you read this just breaks my heart. Because it's not like there were thousands of years and centuries separating these people. This was the people whose grandparents saw God do things that no other group in history had ever seen him do. Their grandparents saw God literally split the Red Sea, allow them to walk on dry land, and then drown the Egyptian army. They saw their grandparents. This is their grandparents. Many of you have grandparents still living. It's like that. It's not years and years and years and years ago. It's just, back just a few years in the wide scheme of things. They saw God move in more ways than they had ever seen in human history. Their parents, this is the generation whose parents wandered in the wilderness for 40 years, and God provided day after day after day after day. And yet now, this is a whole generation growing up in God's land, the promised land, and they have no idea how they got there or why they're there. Somewhere the ball was dropped. Somewhere it failed. And the people of God did not know the Lord or the work. I mean, think about the work that he had done. Think about all that he had done. And they didn't know any of it. They didn't know any of it. And this is so shocking to read. But the truth is, listen to me here, we are facing the exact same problem today. We are facing the exact same problem today. Did you realize that statistics show that of kids who grow up in the church, graduate high school, and move off to college, between 70 and 80% stop going to church altogether, never go back? 70 to 80% of our kids. How many of you work in business? For those of you that work in business, do you think your company would stand for a 70 to 80% failure rate? But yet we as the church are just sitting back letting it happen. We're not passing our faith on, the faith of our fathers, the gospel on to the next generation. And it's not just families, it's churches. Churches corporately, the body of Christ. And we are faced with a generation who does not know the Lord or the work that he has done. And the ball is in our court. The burden is on us. So the question is, what went wrong? What went wrong here? Where are we going wrong? What if we stand back and we look, what happened? Now remember, like I said, Moses had retaught the law of Deuteronomy to God's people and said, listen, this is what you need to do once you get into the land to carry on the faith, to continue to be the salt and light in the world. And we're going to spend the next few weeks in Deuteronomy chapter 6 and walk through some of those things that God said that I think we should be doing. And obviously they failed in that, but I think personally, in Judges chapter 1, we find out the main underlying reason. It's not necessarily that they didn't go to church as much or they didn't read the Bible as much or anything, but there's one reason that lies under the surface that I think was really the fuel that led to this problem. And it's one that we don't really talk about. It's one that we're looking for answers everywhere, and we can pinpoint certain things, but oftentimes this one escapes us. Because right here, they come to Mount Sinai. They leave Egypt. They come to Mount Sinai, and God gives them the law, and he says, listen, you are my chosen people. God even uses the term treasured possession. Israel, you are my people. I've rescued you, and now I'm going to give you a land that you won't have to. Remember, we talked about this last Sunday. I'm going to provide everything you need. It's going to be the land of milk and honey. It's the promised land. I'm going to fight for you. I'm going to defend you. Here, and God on the Mount Sinai gave them the law, the 10 Commandments, and the Mosaic Law. And what he was saying is these aren't restrictions. This is protection. This is what life in relationship looks like when you live in relationship with me. Pagan idols, and we're doing really despicable things. God knew that he was sending his chosen people into a world that hated him. And God said, you are set apart to me. You are my treasured possession. I'm setting you apart. You are my people. I will love you, and I just ask for you to love me and serve me and obey me. And God said, here's the law. Because you're my chosen people. You're my set-apart people. And this is what life and relationship looks like with me. It's going to look different than everybody else. Because they are under the domain of darkness. They are opposed to me. But you are salt and light in this world. And God said, this is how I want your life to look. It's not restriction, it's protection. And so God sent them out. And when they finally get to the promised land after 40 years, God gave them the law, and then he gave them one other command. And for those of us that are new to the faith and struggle with Christianity and some of the things in the Bible, this is kind of hard to understand, and we're not going to dive into it this morning. This is something we can talk about later. But because it is an issue that we have to deal with, and we have to answer the question. But God gave them one command. He said, when you get to Canaan, there are pagan people there, and they hate me. They love Baal, the pagan god, and they are doing despicable things. The Canaanites were involved in child sacrifice, for one thing. And God said, I want you, when you get to the promised land, to wipe everything out. Kill everything that's breathing. The land is yours. I want you to just destroy everything. Devote everything to destruction and start over in my land. Now, I know that's hard for us to wrap our minds around. Why would God do that? Again, that's something we can deal with at a later time. But the point is, God said, there's a culture there. And I know you're going to be tempted to get sucked into that culture. It's going to be enticing. It's going to be tempting. But what I want you to do when you get there is destroy everything. Just destroy everything and set up your new home. Set up this new land in relationship with me. Well, if you read Judges chapter 1, verses 27 through 36, they didn't do that. The Israelites didn't do that. They let some of those people live and continue their practices, and they were surrounded by a culture that was diabolically opposed to God and was sucked in and involved in despicable things that were just horrible, horrendous things. And they said, well, it's okay, that they can live their life and we'll live our life. And what began to happen is that slowly but surely over time, as they were living as God's people set apart wholly unto him in this culture, the culture began to seep into their homes. And it began to seep into their families. And they began, over time, to move from a place where they tolerated it to being okay with it to becoming a part of it. And if you read the Bible, God's people began to move away from a relationship with him and began to adopt some of the pagan practices and the culture around them. And they began to worship some of those gods, and they began to do things that were despicable to God and just horrendous things. And God's people were no longer set apart. They were now part of the culture itself. Here's the reality. The American Christian family is guilty of the exact same thing. The American Christian family is guilty of the exact same thing, and it should come as no surprise that there is now a generation who does not know the Lord or the work that He has done for His people. The American Christian family is guilty of the exact same thing. See, every single day, through media, through other influences, your family and your kids, through the culture around us, is getting crammed down our throat what the new norm looks like. Your family should look like this. Your parenting should look like this. Your children should look like this. Your priorities in your family, they should look like this, because that's what culture says. That's what the world is saying, and the Christian family is opening the door and saying, yeah, sure, I know we're saved, we're going to heaven, but we are no longer set apart. We no longer want to be salt and light. We've let the world into the doors of our homes and our families, and we no longer look like the people of God, the bride of Christ. We look like the world. We look like the world. The American Christian family is guilty of the same thing. Listen to me. If you don't hear anything else, hear this. The gospel of Jesus always goes against the cultural norm. Jesus was countercultural. For those of you that grew up in the 60s, that was a pretty cool thing, right? Being countercultural. There's nothing more countercultural than following Jesus. When saying, I will pursue death to myself and not pursue my own happiness. I'm going to die to myself and not live to myself in the excess of the world. The gospel of Jesus has always been, is now, and will always be countercultural. It always separates us. If we follow Jesus, we are going to be hated by the world. We're not going to look like that. Jesus said as He was getting ready to die, don't be surprised when the world hates you for following me, because you're not going to buy into the cultural norm. But the problem is, we've said it's far easier to look like the world than it is to look like Jesus. It is. It is. It's far easier to look like the world than it is to look like Jesus. I mean, that's hard. It's easy to come to church. It's hard to take up your cross every day and follow Him. It's easy to bring your kids to Sunday school once in a while. It's hard to lead your family in discipleship. It's hard. It's hard to say no to some things in the culture and say yes to the gospel when the world is telling us this is the new norm. You see, we live in a culture that's trying to tell us how our families should spend our money, telling us what our priorities should be, that church and the family, the community of faith is just something that just fits into our schedule, right? We've got sports, we've got academics, we've got clubs, we've got all these things, and church is just something that we're going to pencil in there. And it's just something that we do on the weekends sometimes when we're not busy doing other things. The world tries to tell us, the culture is telling us how to parent our children. Right? When it comes to your child's dating life, we're told that they need to make their own decisions. They can start dating as young as they want to because, hey, it's just what, we can't tell them no. We don't need to push that down in them if they're wanting to explore these things. And we're told to stay out of our kids' business, to give them their freedom. Let me tell you something. I know parents, we say things that we're going to do this in the future, but you better bet you can bet your bottom dollar I'm going to do this. When my girls get to dating age, I'm going to be all up in their business because I don't want some other guy in their business. Parents, we're told to give our kids freedom. Let them make their own choices. Let them explore. Let them experiment. And we're told you don't want to suffocate your children because when they get older, they're going to go crazy and they're going to go wild and they're going to rebel. So when I was in college, I can remember being a freshman, and the kids who went buck wild, crazy partying, they were not rookies. They had experience in that field. Because I think we need to be more concerned about shepherding our children's hearts than we are about whether or not they sin in the future. We need to be more concerned about laying the foundation of the gospel in their lives than we are whether or not they go buck wild when they get to college. The culture tells us how to do all these things. What we allow into our homes through television, through internet. Parents, do you know if your kids are sexually active? It is your business. Do you know what they're looking at on the internet? It is your business. The things that we allow into our home, the things that used to shock us now entertain us. The things that we used to be quick to turn the TV, the remote, we now pay to watch. And the world has slowly but surely infiltrated the homes of the Christian family. And we wonder why we have a generation that no longer knows the Lord or the things that He has done for His people. The culture tells us what our kids need. Now, I'm sorry if I upset any teachers here, but what your kids need most is not the world's best education. It's not to be involved in every sport that exists. It's not to be involved in every civic activity exists. That's not what your kids need most. The culture is telling us, yeah, this is the list of priorities that you need to have for your family. Voddie Baucham is a Christian speaker, and he wrote a book called Faith-Driven Family. And this is what he says in this book. It's so powerful. He says, we look at the biblical mandate and compare it to societal norms, and there appears to be something missing. We believe that somehow we are depriving our children of experiences that will make them more liked, more respected, more normal. Hence, we trade in the biblical standard for a cultural norm that hovers just below mediocrity. All of a sudden, our desires for our children change. Now all we want for our kids is what every other parent wants for their children. The result is a generation about whom Christian Smith, a researcher, has written, religion seems to become rather compartmentalized and backgrounded in the lives and experiences of most U.S. teenagers. This compartmentalization is completely understandable in light of the minimal weight given to spiritual matters. And he closes out by saying this. This is not surprising. It simply reflects the fact that there's very little built-in religious content or connection in the structure of most U.S. adolescents' daily schedules and routines. Most U.S. teenagers' lives are dominated by school and homework, social media. The point is this. We've traded in the biblical mandate for the family, for the cultural norm, and we wonder why we have the mess we have. We wonder why we're in the predicament we're in. What your kids need most may not be what the culture says they need most. See, there's two reactions that we can have to this. We can either hide from culture and shut off everything and, live in a huddle and bunker and not, don't stay away from the world, it's bad. Or we can do the polar opposite and sell out. But I think there's a happy medium. I think there's a good medium. And I think this is the point, parents. I think this is the point. This is the decision that can change the destiny of your family, that can change the rest of your family's life. This is the decision, because what your kids need most is not a great education. It's a shepherd. What your kids need most, what our families, husbands, what your wife needs most is a shepherd. What your family needs most, what your kids, what your grandkids need most is a shepherd. What the kids at this church need most is a shepherd. We need shepherds. See, in John chapter 10, Jesus talked about himself as being the good shepherd. And I think if we're going to follow Jesus, that means becoming more like him. And so Jesus said, I'm the good shepherd. And if we're trying to pursue him in every area of our life, then I think then we see what a good shepherd looks like. As a father, as a husband, as a mom in the home, as an adult, as a husband, as a wife. I think what we see in Jesus' life is what a good shepherd looks like and what our families, what our kids need more than anything else. John chapter 10, Jesus said a shepherd does several things. The first thing that the shepherd does is he guards. He guards. Look what Jesus said. Truly I say to you, he who does not enter the sheepfold by the door but climbs in by another way, that man is a thief and a robber. But he who enters by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him the gatekeeper opens. A shepherd, a good shepherd, the kind of shepherd your children needs, guards. In other words, what this says is that husbands, wives, moms, dads, it doesn't matter what situation in life you're in, you put your stake in the ground and you say, I am claiming this home for Jesus. Nothing goes in, nothing goes out without under my watchful eye. And everything we do, the way we spend our time, the way we spend our resources, the way we prioritize, everything will bring honor and glory to Jesus because we answer to Him. This is the kind of shepherd that Joshua was when he said, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." You do what you want to do, we're going to serve Jesus. Your family needs a shepherd who will stand guard and say, "This home belongs to King Jesus." What else does a shepherd do? A shepherd leads. A shepherd leads. Jesus said the sheep hear His voice. And He calls His own sheep by name and leads them out. When He has brought out all His own, He goes before them, and the sheep follow Him, for they know His voice. Your children, your family, your wives, men, your wives need a leader. A spiritual leader. I am not primarily responsible for your family's spiritual growth. Dads, husbands, you are. You're going to stand before God one day and give an account. Moms, some of you are single moms. You don't have a husband in the home, or you don't have a husband that's following Jesus. Your children need a leader, a shepherd who will lead them. Did you realize, I was reading this week, I found this just horrible. A study was done in Southern Baptist churches, and only 9% said, "My family devotes at least an hour a year to family worship." We've dropped the ball. Krista Gray is not responsible for your child's spiritual growth. Marcus Dickerson is not responsible for your teenager's spiritual growth. You are. Are you worshiping as a family? Well, I don't know the Bible. How long have you been walking with Jesus? Shoot, if you work a job for 40 years, I expect you to know something about it. Doesn't take much to grab a Bible story book and lead your family in prayer and worship. Our homes should be the greatest church our kids ever experience. Are you leading your families? Husbands, are you leading your wives spiritually? Dads, are you leading your children? Moms, are you leading your children? Our kids need shepherds who will lead. And parents, you can't take your kids somewhere you've never been yourself. As you follow the chief shepherd, you need to be shepherding your children and your spouses. Shepherd leads. A shepherd protects. Jesus said this in verse 11, "I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. He who is a hired hand and not a shepherd, who does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees, and the wolf snatches them and scatters them." A shepherd protects. Parents, we're so guilty of sacrificing our children on the altar of popularity. We have sacrificed our children on the altar of popularity. Well, we want them to have friends, and everybody else is doing this. It's okay, you know. Shame on us. Shame on us that we are the wilderness generation, raising up one that is being influenced and sucked into the culture around us. Our children need protectors. Hey, parents, no might be the best thing your kids ever hear you say. The law didn't restrict, it protected. No is not a, hey, we're holier than them, but hey, we are trying to pursue Jesus. He goes that way, the world goes that way. Choose you this day who you will serve. A shepherd protects. And then finally, a shepherd nurtures. Listen to what Jesus said, "I am the good shepherd." And I love what he says. If you read this too fast, you miss it. Look what Jesus says, "I know my own." I know my sheep. Your family needs a shepherd. Husbands, your wife needs a shepherd who will nurture her. Your kids need a shepherd who will nurture them emotionally, who will cry with them, laugh with them, rejoice with them, who knows everything going on in their life and shepherds them and nurtures them and is compassionate towards them and leads them through the valleys towards Jesus. I know my sheep, and I love them, would lay down my life for them. Now for the rest of us, if we look big picture, our church needs shepherds. I've only been doing this dad thing for 5 years, and I've only been doing the husband thing for going on 8. I don't know anything. Some of you moms or young moms, you don't know what you're doing. Let's just be honest. What do we need as a church? This is one thing that I think our church could and should do much better in. But we're so busy doing other stuff. Listen to what Paul writes to the church when he's writing to Titus, a pastor in the early church. He says this, older women, be reverent in behavior, not slanderers or slaves to much wine. But look what he says to them. They are to teach what is good and so train the young women to love their husbands and children, to be self-controlled, pure, working from home, kind and submissive to their own husbands, that the word of God may not be reviled. What is he saying there? The younger women need the older women. To say, this is what countercultural lifestyle looks like. Let me shepherd you. Some of you older ladies, you need to be shepherding the younger ladies. One-on-one, in a small group, something like that. I'm going to tell you something. Several months ago, our home group, the Hawkins home group, we did a parenting study. And the greatest thing, I might embarrass them, I don't know, but one of the greatest things to have in there was Jack and Sherry Holbrook, who have been doing the parenting thing way longer than us. And I'm going to tell you, we didn't look at that book half the time. We just looked at them and said, okay, so what do you do in this situation? We don't have that at this church like we ought. The older ladies discipling the younger ladies. And then look what he says, and likewise, and he's talking to men here, urge the younger men to be self-controlled. What this is looking like is a family reaching families within the church. Families worshiping with families. Families connecting with families. Families discipling families. And I'm going to tell you something. You will see something so powerful in this church that you've never seen before. Are we going to be countercultural? I want to congratulate Miss Presley Latham. She's here. Presley, you won. I'll have your nice gift either Wednesday or Sunday, whenever you're here next. Presley guessed that there was 900 marbles in this jar. There's 936. Now that's kind of an odd number, I know. But did you know that from the moment your child is born to the moment they graduate high school, there's, on average, 936 weeks that you have with them. And if you were to start this and you were to take out every week that goes by, a marble for every week, you would begin to see and understand time is short. You don't have much time. Every week counts. Every day matters. What are you doing? Are you shepherding your children each week? Are you shepherding your families each week? Every week matters. Are you shepherding one another in this church? Can I be honest with you? There is a group of younger ladies in this church who are young moms who are crying out for discipleship. I'm just going to go ahead and put it out there. They are, because my wife's one of them. You don't have to be a pro. There are young men in this church who are crying out for leaders. Are we going to reframe the modern family? Be countercultural. Follow Jesus. Would you bow your heads and close your eyes as we come to this time of response? And I'm going to ask our band if they would come and lead us in a song. And the place that you need to start is that